Hello, how are you? Good afternoon. How's the conference so far? Good? Great? Cool. Well, this is going to be the PWA Cheat Sheet for 2023. Yeah, we are kind of there, right? So the year is ending. First, how many of you are actually creating PWAs? I can actually see your hands. OK, so it's kind of 20%. OK, cool. So the idea of this talk is to show you what actually you need to do this year, next year, to actually create a good experience. So first, my name is Maximiliano. I can go by Max. It's a long name. I'm from Argentina. Actually, I came from Buenos Aires, so I'm actually the speaker with the longest flight or travel to actually get there. I'm a mobile and web developer, so I've been doing web since 1996 and mobile apps since 2001. So recently, I authored, I don't know what was, OK, yeah, I authored that one, not the blue screen. That's Bill Gates. Learn PWA. It's on web.dev. It's a free kind of interactive ebook or course on PWA, so you can actually get it for free there. And also, I have been authoring content for many years on PWA, the web performance, and so on. You can find content on many libraries. And we are going to talk about PWA. I actually authored that cover article on a magazine, rest in peace, by the way, the printed magazine. So I really like this cover. I didn't design the cover, by the way, but it actually says PWA as a DNA. And that's actually what PWA is. It's the DNA of the web. It's the current DNA of the web. That's kind of the idea. So actually, a progressive web app, in case you are here because I'm speaking in English and maybe you don't speak French and you are here and you don't know what PWA is. So it's an app built with web technologies. So it's actually a web app, okay, that is not just running in the browser. It can also, while online, it can also work when you are offline or where the user is offline. So it can work fast, not like old web apps or websites. And it can be installed on different platforms, mobile and desktop. And once it's installed, it looks like any other app in that system. That's kind of the idea of a progressive web app or PWA. And it's actually ideal for all those apps that are just consuming web content or web services. So think about this. How many apps that you have on your phone are actually just parsing JSON and rendering JSON on the screen? So if that's what you have, actually, the progressive web app platform, the web platform, it's special, and actually it works really well on those use cases. In case you haven't seen this before, this is Android. You go to a website. You can install the website from there, from an install button. And then you have an actually APK, an Android package, installed silently by Chrome. And now it's just an app. Or the same happens on iOS. You go to the same website, and then you add it to the home screen, iOS or iPadOS, and it looks like an icon in the home screen. And maybe you're thinking, oh, that's just a shortcut, okay, a bookmark. But when you open, in this case, Scoosh, it looks like any other app in the system. It's not actually running within the Safari boundaries. That's the idea of a PWA on mobile. And it's not just mobile. This is desktop, the same PWA on desktop. When you go with Chrome, you can install the app from the menu or from an icon that you have in the Omnibox in the URL bar, and then you have a standalone window. And it appears like any other app in the system. It appears on macOS in the dock. It appears in Spotlight, on Windows in the Start menu, on Chrome OS and Linux in the launcher. It depends on the launcher you're using. So then it looks like any other app in the system. So typically, a PWA was a web app. So any kind of web app. Actually, it can be a website. We don't know exactly where the boundary is, right? So, but it can be just HTML, if you want. And on top of that, we were adding a layer known as a service worker. That if you have never heard about the service worker, let me give you a quick and dirty definition that some of you won't like, probably. But a service worker is a kind of a web server that we are installing in user's device. So next time the user is using our web app, it will be served from that web server. It's a quick and dirty definition, and of course, it can be much more than that. It's just one use case. But just to give an idea in case you haven't heard about it. And also, we are adding another layer known as the distribution layer that most of the time is the web app manifest. That is just a JSON that has all the metadata for your app. And I have the first news for most of you. For all of you raising your hand a few minutes ago before the blue screen. So now, or next year, the service worker won't be required. This is actually new. And this has to do with Chromium. On Chromium, the PWA criteria won't require a service worker anymore. And actually, if you don't provide a service worker, so that kind of web server, actually, Chrome or Edge or any other Chromium browser will provide you a default offline experience. That will just be a message saying, hey, you're offline, this app is not working, with probably the app's icon. So instead of seeing the standard offline experience, you will see now a better one. So now, if you have just, for the next year, a web app and the distribution metadata, you're done. You have a PWA. OK? So that's for the next year. And a PWA is based on web app foundations that we all know: responsive web design, a progressive enhancement, web performance, please, and everything first, mobile first, wherever first, VR first. So actually shipping code that works well on every device. That's kind of the idea. So those are the foundations. I'm not going to talk about those here. So quickly, the state of the platform right now. Today on mobile, you have support for installing a PWA on Android for actually most of the browsers. And on iOS, it works on Safari only. So you probably know that Chrome and Firefox and Edge on iOS are not actually their own browsers. It's a kind of a custom Safari, if you want. So that's why it can only be installed from Safari. And now they also work on Oculus. For example, you can create PWAs for VR experiences. And on desktop, it works actually on Chrome and Edge on most of the platforms, including Windows 7. So you can actually have a Windows 7 installed app experience without actually creating an installer, an executable, DLLs, and all that stuff. So it's actually pretty good. And in terms of user support, users browsing the web today, 96% of your users are actually supporting service workers, and 92% are supporting installation of the app. And by the way, the default experience, it's 100%, because at the end, it's just the web. So if you cannot install the app, and if it's not working offline, you can still use the app as usual. And for now, we don't have any installation support on the web view, for example, on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok embedded browsers. So from there, you can use the PWA, but you can't actually install it. And also on the Apple Watch and on desktop, no support or plans from Firefox or Safari. Okay? So on desktop is Chromium only at this point. But I promised you a cheat sheet. So that was to give you a quick overview of a PWA and the current state. So what about the cheat sheet? The idea is that we're going to cover 4 categories here. First, we have already seen that the basic PWA support should be there. So the service worker, that now it's going to be optional. The web app manifest, that's the metadata. And web performance. Those are the 3 most important things that I want to mention as the basic PWA support. But over the next, maybe half an hour, or maybe, yeah, half an hour. So we're going to cover installation experience, so how or what do you need to do to increase the installation experience, the app experience, so after it was installed, what do you need to do to increase the app experience, and then platform integration. So we're going to cover actually 3 topics per category. So let's start with installation experience. This is not new, but unfortunately, there are not so many PWAs out there actually implementing this. It has to do with creating your own custom installation user interface. So installation availability will be available on browsers with the PWA criteria, for example, Firefox and Safari and Chrome. And they will, it depends on the browser, but they can render an info bar or a banner. They can add a badge somewhere in the URL bar, for example, on Chrome on desktop. They can add a menu item, so you can install the app. Or you can provide your own button within your app. That, by the way, that's Chromium only, the last one. Okay? So that means that the user has many ways to actually install the app. But the last one is probably it's one that needs your experience, needs your code, right? So to create your custom install promotion banner, that can look like a button, it can look like an info bar that you create with CSS, or it can be part of your menu or settings or part of your action flow. I mean, you're an airline, so after the user has already paid, you propose the user to install the app at that point to increase conversion. So for that, you need to implement before install prompt. So we're going to see some code here. I will share the slides on my Twitter account anyway later. So the before install prompt event was part of the web app manifest spec, and now, because it was only implemented by Chrome, it's actually out of the spec. Okay? But the event will be fired when the current URL passes the PWA criteria. For example, on Android, today, on most users, you need the service worker. But there are experiments running right now removing the service worker requirement. So, and also the PWA shouldn't be already installed, okay? Because if not, you already have the app. You don't need to install it again. In that case, you need to listen for the event before install prompt and call prevent default typically to avoid any banner or any promotion from the browser itself. And there, you actually need to save somewhere, like a global variable, that install prompt event variable. You need to save the event that you received there, the object that you receive. It's kind of a token. Okay, so you have the token, the torch, that lets you call the native installation dialog. It happens only in that event, so you cannot get that torch, that object anywhere else. And then you have your own button somewhere or your own menu item, and when the user clicks there, you invoke a method of that object, of that token. Okay, it's called prompt. That's all. It's as easy as this, but you need to implement this. If you don't do that, maybe your users actually don't know that your app is installable. Okay. So another thing that you should be doing, I could say must be doing, but let's say should, is to enhance the installation dialog. So today, on Android, for example, instead of seeing like a pretty old banner that actually says add to the home screen, add this website to the home screen, you can actually look at that one that is actually, it's really good. It has screenshots, it has the install button, and the one that you see at the right, it's coming on desktop. Okay, so that's actually Canary with the flag enabled. So it's coming on desktop as well. So if you want to get this experience, of course, it's much better than the other one. And for users, it looks like a Play Store installation dialog. Anyway. And to actually get there, this is available on Android, and it's coming on desktop. It will actually change the verbs from add or add to the home screen, but it's not actually clear, okay, the effect of adding this website to the home screen. And it's replacing that to install, which is much, much better. It includes the app's icon, the name, a description that you write, and screenshots that you define. So you need to provide that data in your manifest. The manifest is that JSON file for your metadata. So you just need to provide a description, an array of images, PNG files, JPEG files that you take from your app, and that's all. But if you don't do that, the browser will fall back to an old classic installation dialog that has less conversion rate. The last thing that I have here for you in terms of installation experience has to do with identification. So how do we identify a web app? So, or a PWA. So what's a PWA? So what's the signature of a PWA? So on a website, we have typically the origin, let's say the domain. On a native app in app stores, there is an ID, like an app ID. Okay, that's like the unique key in the app store. But what about the PWA? Because it's just an HTML. It can be a folder in a domain. And you can have many HTMLs in that folder. And every HTML can be actually pointing to different web app manifests. So are they actually different apps? Are they this part of the same app? So we have that situation that is not clear. And on many different operating systems, they're using different techniques. So we didn't have a way to identify a PWA. Okay, so is it the origin? Is it the start URL that is a key on the metadata? Is it the manifest URL, so the manifest itself URL that defines this? And on every OS is different, so every implementation is actually using a different idea. So this is important in case, for example, you change the start URL, because now you want to add an analytics UTM query string variable. So you go to the manifest. I mean, marketing is calling you and telling you, hey, we want to know how many users are actually using the app from the icon, from the PWA install icon. So then you go to the manifest and you change the URL. But if you change the URL, what happens with users that already have your app? Are they being invited to install a different app, or is it the same app? Because the URL has changed. So it's not clear, and it depends on the browser. So that's why today in the spec, we have a new member. Okay, it's called ID. And it's currently implemented on Chromium on desktop as of today. It's coming on Android. And probably other platforms will use it later. It's just a string. Okay? It's one ID that you define. And that ID should be unique within your origin. Okay? So you can have many PWAs, different apps in your own domain, if they have different strings. So then, tomorrow, if you change the URL, if they have the same ID, it's the same app. So it's clear. Okay? So what happens for those of you that already have published a PWA and you didn't define an ID? Here comes the problem. So if you have already deployed your app before 2021, when this ID member was added, which actually last year, you need to go to Chrome DevTools and look at your current compute app ID. So actually, Chromium already created an ID for you. And you shouldn't change it. So I'm sorry, but you are not free to pick your own ID at this point. Okay? So if you're deploying a PWA today, now, then you can use whatever string you want. The idea is to increase the experience of all your users right now. Okay? Because right now, you don't have, you have a lot of users already using your app. So any string that will be unique within your origin then will define your app. And today, if you already have published your app, you have there the compute app ID. So if you have a deployed app, you need to use that ID. You can change the start URL, but keep that ID anyway. Okay? And you have an article on web.dev to actually read more about this issue, about this problem. So we have already followed the basic PWA support. Okay, remember the service worker that now is optional, the web app manifest, and web performance. And now we have already seen how to increase the installation experience on every PWA that you have and that you create for the future, for the next year. You should be creating your custom install user interface somewhere in your app. You should enhance the installation dialog that today is Android, but it will be desktop as well. And we hope that Apple, at some point in the future, we don't know, okay, we know that we should be quiet because maybe they're hearing. We'll see, okay, what happens with Apple. But they will get at one point, fortunately, I guess, and then app identification. So that will increase the experience for your users today on desktop and in the near future on Android as well. So now, on the next category, we need to talk about the app experience. So after the app was installed, how we can increase, or what do you need to do to increase the app experience? And we're going to start talking about app icons and splash screens. That is kind of the first front end of your app after it was installed. So a long time ago, okay, Android 8 changed how icons were actually rendered in the system. I'm not sure if you remember that, in case you were an Android user before. But for example, here you have a couple of PWAs on the same phone in Android 7 and then Android 8. Okay? So you will see that on Android 7, icons have any shape. So in this case, they were just transparent PNG files. But from Android 8, of course, that's not only Android 8, from Android 8, so 70% of the Androids today, probably 70-something. So, OK, we'll see. Let's see if this is my side or not. I don't think so. We shouldn't be mentioning Apple here when we are talking about PWAs. You know what happens when we... So I don't think it's here. So I'm seeing everything right. I can just try to unplug this, unplug it again, but we'll see. Yeah, OK. It's a Mac, right? And we are talking about Apple. So I was saying that we have a problem from Android 8. So actually, icons are taking a shape that it depends on your launcher, the shape that you're using. So different phones, we're actually using different shapes. And then your icon is really small within that shape, so it doesn't really look nice. So that's why the spec has created a new idea that, unfortunately, only 1 point something of the PWAs are actually using that. It wasn't me, it was him. He's the guy. He's from Apple. He's from Apple. And it's called a maskable icon. So a maskable icon will solve the problem. Okay? So you still provide a square icon, but with enough discardable padding content out of that safe area. And let me show you an example, because if not, it's not clear. So the idea is that you define a safe area that is like a circle within your icon with a radius of 40%. OK, let's see an example. You have that icon. Okay? It's a calculator PWA. So if you apply the safe area, that's the safe area, the 40% radius circle in the middle. So what's the problem with this? Then your icon will look like this on different Android devices. So it's not nice. So what you need to do is to add more padding to the icon, so then your logo or icon actually fits within the safe area, and then it looks nice on every Android device. So the thing is that you actually need to provide explicitly a maskable icon. And 99% of the PWAs are not doing this, so they are providing a bad experience for Android, for the Android icon. You actually need to provide one icon with the purpose maskable. That's all. Okay? So it's another PNG with that size. It's still square, 512 by 512, with the purpose maskable. But you need to do that, okay, explicitly. So there is a nice tool, maskable.app, where you can actually upload your icon and see how your icon is going to look like. And you can add the padding from there and download the new PNG file in case you are not a Photoshop user or now a Canva user, maybe. So what about Safari? Oh, no, I'm talking about Apple again. So Safari ignores icons with maskable. I don't know why, actually, because they're actually applying a mask to the icon. So they should be using this. So they will use the PNG without the maskable. Maybe it looks fine on iOS, but anyway, if you don't like it, okay, and for example, if you provide only a maskable icon, look at the calc icon there. There is no icon. It's just a screenshot of a PWA. So if you don't provide a non-maskable icon, Safari will fall back to a screenshot, okay, which is bad, as you can expect. So fortunately, you can still provide a link with rel Apple Touch icon that is actually classic at this point. So you can override the iOS or iPadOS icon just with this link, okay? And if you're providing one icon for all for iOS, it should be 180, because that's the resolution on iOS. What about SVG? So today, Chromium on desktop will prefer SVG. So if you provide an SVG icon, Chrome will use that one, Chromium, actually. That's Edge as well. But no one is providing an SVG icon in the manifest. Okay, well, you should start doing that. And on Android, it's coming. There are some experiments also on Firefox. It depends on the browser. So on some browsers, if you have an SVG, they will start using it. Anyway, Androids will convert, so the browser will actually convert that SVG into PNGs. You don't see that anyway, but we will have the right resolution. So final recommendation for icons: one non-maskable icon, one maskable icon, another icon for iOS in case you don't like how it looks like, okay? And one SVG icon, okay? So that's actually the recommendation for icons for next year PWA. What about the splash screens? That is part of the same group. So splash screens on Android are automatically generated by the browser, so you cannot customize it, okay? So they look like this. Probably you have seen them. And they're taking the theme color from the manifest, the background color from the manifest, they're taking the icon, and the name. So the only thing that you can customize are those properties. That's all, okay? But it's time to talk about Apple again and iOS. iOS is not auto-generating splash screens. By default, you will get the white screen. So the splash screen is the animation that you see when you open the icon. By default, it's a white screen. And yeah, it's not like the nicest experience that you can get. So to help on that, Apple has another link that you can provide. It's Apple Touch Startup Image. The problem is that the image will be used only if the PNG that you are providing has the exact same size of that device, okay? And what's the problem? We have a lot of devices, okay? In fact, it looks like this. And on some devices, like the Pro Max and iPads, you can use the home screen in landscape. So that means that you also need to provide the landscape version, okay? So it's a mess, because you need to provide a lot of PNG, okay? So yeah, the advantage is that it's fully customizable, so you can create your own PNG with whatever content you want there. Your logo, or it can be just a screenshot of the first screen, so it like creates like a smooth transition between the splash screen and the first screen. You can also provide a dark mode version that it's not completely possible on Android as well. So on dark mode or night mode, you can provide an alternative version of the PNG, but it needs a lot of work. So if you want to provide, and you should provide, startup images for iOS and iPadOS, you can do it manually. I don't recommend you to do that. You can use a static generator. I will show you an example in a minute. A client-side library, that's actually a very clever idea. So you can use JavaScript to create the canvas in memory, render your splash screen there with the current screen dimensions, convert that into base64 with JavaScript, and inject that into a link element with the data URI. Dirty, but it works. Or you can use a server-side library in case you detect the iOS, the version, and device that is every day is more complicated to do that. So yeah, probably you don't want to do that. So for example, for a static generator, the best one available today is called PWA Asset Generator. It's on NPM, so you just run a command in the terminal, okay, and it will create everything for you. And you will see it will create a lot of PNG files, and it will give you everything that you need to copy and paste into your HTML. Actually, we are talking about links with media queries. Okay? Of course, you can integrate this with a build system. This is actually something bad, but Apple has deprecated this meta tag. I'm not sure if you have seen it before. It's Apple Mobile Web App Capable. That actually, it was presented by Steve Jobs. Actually, PWA, the concept of the PWA, not the name, but the idea, was actually presented and created by Apple. Okay? Then 2008, WWDC 2008. And this comes from that moment. Now it's deprecated, but if you don't provide that meta tag, splash screens or launch screens will not work. Okay? Looks like a bug, but yeah, like a lot of bugs in Safari, they're not being changed. So that's for icons and splash screens. Now let's talk about theming. That looks like something simple, but there are a lot of tricks, okay, that you need to understand to actually theme your app properly. So what's the theme? The idea is to create a color, define a color that is the theme of your app. Okay? For example, here we have different examples of how the theme is being applied on mobile, on desktop, and here it's on Android. So that's the color. The theme is just a property in the manifest that accepts any CSS valid color, but don't try to use semi-transparent colors or things like that because it's a mess. So it's just using a static color. And also, there is a meta tag that you can provide. So not just in the manifest, but be careful because in the manifest, it's theme underscore, okay? So it's using a snake case, okay, underscore, and in the meta tag is dash, so it's kebab case, okay? So be careful with that. So, and because it's a meta tag, you can actually change it with JavaScript. It's actually pretty cool to do that. So for example, if you have an app and the app has a state, like an error state, you can change the theme with yellow or red, or so you can change the color, okay, which is actually pretty cool. And today, you also have accent color, okay? It's on CSS, that will also provide some kind of theming on form controls. But now we have dark mode, night mode as well. So can we provide alternatives? Well, today, you can in the meta tag. In the manifest is coming, so it's not there yet. But it's in the meta tag with a media query, so you can actually do this. And then also with accent color, okay, you can do something like this and provide two different accent colors for light theme and dark themes. Okay? So it was just simple, but things you need to understand. And it's a good idea to provide an alternative set of colors for dark mode. So now the last one on app experience has to do with desktop enhancement. Most of the PWAs out there were tested on mobile, on Android, on iOS. And then desktop appeared like 2 years ago. But a lot of PWAs didn't care too much about desktop. But now maybe they have a lot of users installing the app on desktop. They don't know, like YouTube Music, TikTok. You can have a TikTok desktop application, if you want, installing the PWA. So you need to understand that desktop is different, and there are unique features that you need to like understand, okay, and add some code on top of it. So we're going to see the title, how to control windows today, and new APIs. So the new life of title. Title were typically used for SEO lately. That's the old title element in HTML. But today, it's going to be the OS Windows title. So if you have a React application or any client-side application on every route, maybe you want to change also the title because it will change the Windows title. But you should be careful about using your exact app's name in the string. Let me show you an example. So that's PWA Builder. Okay, so you can see at the top the title. That's the name of the app. But what if I change the title, like DevFest? You can see it's using the name of your app dash DevFest. But if I use also the name of my app inside, if I have the same string, it's not prefixing the name of the app. But what if I add a space, so now it's not the same string? Well, now you have two PWA builders. The string coming from the name of the app, and then the string that you're adding. So you need to be very careful and test what happens in the real world with your title. Okay? This is to avoid phishing. That's kind of the idea. And now we're going back a couple of years ago to Netscape. I'm not sure if you were there, or IE. Because now you can use APIs that we haven't used for 20 years, because now because you have your own standalone window, you can move the window, and you can resize the window using very old JavaScript APIs. You can open new windows. Okay, something that with tab-based browsers were actually removed lately. So here you have an example of, or maybe, yeah, nope, okay, just want to play. No? Yeah. So if you install the app, now you can play with this and open new windows, resize every window just with JavaScript. That's a PWA in action on desktop. So you can move it, you can resize it, okay, from JavaScript. So you can have window management because now you're an app. And now also we have a new API called Multi-Screen Windows Placement API. So you can actually know how many screens do we have. What happens if the screen is changing resolution, or if the user is applying a new monitor? You can place windows in every screen. So there are a lot of things that you need to consider when you're creating an app, because you are an app developer now. And also we have Windows Controls Overlay already shipped on desktop, that if you define something in the manifest, you can now render content in the title bar on desktop only, with HTML and CSS. So you can actually integrate on desktop much better, okay, using just this. So to the basic PWA support and installation experience, now we have other tips and tricks on app experience, theming, icons, splash screens, and desktop enhancement. The last one has to do with platform integration. So we're going to talk first about modern authentication. So I need like 3 hours only to talk about this. So I will just go really quickly and give you some maybe keywords for you to go and research later. So let's start with web authentication. Actually, you can use this today. It's coming with an organization known as FIDO. It's authentication agnostic. It's not actually a new API. It's been for a while. But not a lot of web apps are actually using it today. You can use biometrics, like your finger or your Face ID. You can use security keys as well, new ideas that are coming. And you can use this with web authentication, with a password. For example, the user is logging in for the first time with username and password, all classic way. And after the user is doing that, you're asking the user, hey, next time, do you want to use your face or your finger or Windows Hello? Okay, so you are mixing both technologies. Or you can be completely passwordless in the future. Okay, so you can use Windows Hello on Windows, on Chrome, on desktop, or Safari. Okay, you can use, you can log in with your phone with your QR code. You can use a USB security key. That's a Safari. No, that's iOS. And here they have iOS and Safari. So on different platforms, you have different experience, but it will increase, okay, how the experience on authentication. And now iOS has shipped passkey that is coming on macOS next week as well. With passkey, and this is a standard, it's not from Apple, so actually Microsoft and Google are also going to implement this in the future. A passkey is a complete replacement for the password. Okay, so it's a completely new idea, and it's on top of web authentication. So your web app should start using this. And also, if you have CAPTCHAs, remember CAPTCHAs? Okay. Yesterday, I was on Expedia, like selecting penguins for like in an infinite loop. So I need to prove that I was human and pick a penguin again, a penguin. Yeah, I need to use another provider because it never worked. Well, we can replace CAPTCHAs with a new thing known as private access tokens. Okay? It's complicated to explain how that works, okay? But just go and research on that because it will increase the experience. The second one that I have here for you has to do with background execution. So we're going to break the limits of the web executing code in the background when the user is not using your PWA. So we're going to start talking about background sync really quickly. So in this case, a PWA can defer a sync action, like saving data in the cloud, until the device has a stable connection to the server later. And for that, an event will be fired in the service worker. So this is an API on top of the service worker. Immediately, in case everything is working fine, or later, in case the user is offline or with an unstable connection. And also if the battery is in a good level. That works automatically, I would say. In that case, our service worker will wake up in the background. The user is not using our web app anymore, and it will ask us, hey, go ahead and try to sync that pending operation. All the execution happens in the background. You just register a tag name, and then on the service worker, you listen for the sync event. The browser handles all the background operation, okay? So it's actually pretty simple. But then we have periodic background sync. Periodic background sync will actually ask the user permission to periodically execute code in the background. By the way, user is actually the browser here, not actually the real user. So we can actually, let me go quickly on this. If there is battery and we're Wi-Fi, okay, we can ask the browser to execute code every morning, even if the user is not using our app. We can go fetch data from the server and update an IndexedDB database. So when the user opens our app, it's already updated. Okay? This is actually implemented in Chromium, and everything happens in the background. Okay? So the execution frequency will be honored based on a site engagement score defined by the browser that you cannot do anything about this. Okay? So you just ask for permission. You register a background sync operation with a tag and the interval that you prefer. Okay? It's not really mandatory. And then on your service worker, of course, if the API is available, on your service worker, you will just listen for another event and do something every morning. Okay? That's kind of the idea. And the last one here is web push. With web push, you can ask the user to permission to send notifications, and if granted, the service worker can, in the background, notify the user of something. And we can subscribe to push. You probably have heard about web push before. Okay? And a push event will be fired in the service worker. But I'm talking about this because, yeah, we have been using this for a while in several browsers, but we never had support in Safari. Okay? What now? Safari is supporting web push on macOS Ventura starting next Monday. I think next Monday it's going to be shipped. And iOS and iPadOS is coming next year, finally. Okay? So finally, we will be able to use this. And the last thing that I have here for you is OS integration. So just want to tell you that today you can integrate your PWA with file and protocol handling. That is, your PWA can handle files and protocols, web share target, and media session. For example, on file handling, you can ask the OS to read CSV files or PDF files, and it's something in the manifest. Or protocol handling. For example, I can say DevFest. So then you receive a QR code with a link to web plus DevFest // something, and it will open your PWA, your installed PWA. And web share target, if the user is sharing content from another app, your PWA can say, hey, I want to receive that share operation. So a lot of things that will integrate your PWA in the operating system, Android, iOS, or desktop. Of course, not everything is currently available on Apple, okay? But anyway, it will be at one point. And media session lets you integrate audio playing and video playing with the operating system, but not just with your phone, also with a watch, and even with your car. And then the idea is that you can provide the text, all the metadata there. It's just metadata with the JavaScript API, and it will actually populate all the data inside for your watch, for your car, from a PWA, from a browser. So these are new interactions, new integrations that you have at the OS level. So we've seen basic PWA support, how to increase the app experience, how to increase the installation experience, and now platform integration, like a better modern authentication, background execution, and the OS integration. So that's, for me, the final cheat sheet. So everything that you need to do in a modern PWA for this age, for next year. Okay, so if you have a PWA, please do everything that you have here to create a good experience. So the web evolves frequently. Okay, we've seen this. You should stay on top of new capabilities. Unfortunately, not every PWA is updating everything that we have seen here today. So just taking the example of maskable icons, they've been here for like 2 years, and a lot of PWAs are not providing the right icon for Android. So please use Progressive enhancement. And if you want to learn more about everything that I've been mentioning today, go and check web.dev, learn PWA. Okay, it's free. And I think that's all. Thank you.